My pick of the week was the 1959 epic Ben-Hur. Why the fuck did I pick this one? I don't know. This is the story. This is the story of Ben-Hur, who is a Jew who was forsaken by his Roman friend. He's basically just betrayed, and then he works his way from being a slave up to being Roman nobility again, so he can fucking horse race against his, the person that betrayed him, and fucking find his family. And then Jesus, our Lord and Savior, love that guy, gets fucking crucified, and his death saves his family who got fucking leprosy while they were stuck in a jail for years while he was off being a slave. Anyways, that's Ben-Hur. Tanner, what's your haiku?
My haiku is inspired by Ben-Hur. A Jewish prince framed.
That's it.
Oh, worked hard to earn his freedom. Now back for revenge. I wrote the K in worked very strangely, and so I had a very hard time figuring out what that word was.
Worked.
Yeah.
Very Cleopatra-esque movie.
I disagree. I think that this is literally just New Testament Count of Monte Cristo.
I kinda see it.
My big problem with this film, and this is probably just a product of the times.
I hate Jesus.
I hate Jews! No, it's
Yikes.
because the big thing that sucked with this movie is that obviously it's a big, long epic. You're supposed to be really engrossed in this guy's story, his revenge, him saving his family. But there really wasn't that much of an emotional draw for me, or at no point in the movie did I ever actually feel emotion at all, which I think is the exact opposite of what should happen with a movie like this. Obviously, there's a lot of emotional things you could have, seeing his, his mom and his sister have fucking leprosy, they're trapped in cages for years, him being a fucking slave, or just even being put in that position in the first place, maybe even Jesus saving them at the end of the movie. There was absolutely nothing that fucking gripped me emotionally whatsoever. I was mostly just kind of watching shit happen for 3 hours and 40 minutes, which actually wasn't that long because it was 15 minutes of nothing happening at the start of the movie, and then it was whatever.
Intermission and all that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'm in the pretty much exact same position as you, Jackson. There was really nothing that tied me to this movie whatsoever. It was really just a fucking 3 hours of fucking nothing, basically.
But there's still a lot to go off with the movie. I think the performances were pretty good for the most part. I think the the environments they're setting up, the whole sets they're doing with the the outfits and everything, they all looked really good, especially for a movie set in a movie from 1959. And honestly, I think a lot of the action scenes they did, specifically the horse race, was quite engrossing. The horse race went on for a long time, and I was actually interested in watching it. It was a fucking cool scene.
It didn't hurt that we also were under the impression that someone died during that scene, and so we were all sitting there like, dude, when does it fucking happen?
Yeah, some of those guys getting ran over was fucking brutal, dude. It was crazy. But yeah, I think this movie because I think most people look at this movie like an epic. You're not reading or watching some long drawn out emotional story. You're kind of just watching some guy fuck shit up and be cool, and that's kind of what this movie is. Which it has its benefits, but there's also the fact that it's not super engaging throughout a lot of it for me.
Alright, I'm going on the flip side here now. I disagree with everything Jackson just said. However, I do think that near the beginning of the movie was fantastic, where you just had Ben-Hur and his fucking pal being homosexual boys with each other, They, my gaydar was going off like crazy. I was just waiting for them to finally embrace each other and give each other a big old kiss. Unfortunately, never happened, but I wish that the movie went in that direction. It would have been really sweet.
Anybody else have anything to say about this film?
I've barely talked about it, so yes, I do have things to say. Yippee! I liked Ben-Hur. I thought it was a pretty good story. Honestly, I thought it was pretty well-paced, guys.
I would agree. I don't think there's a problem with the pacing. It's really fucking long, which is, I guess, a problem in and of itself, but I don't think there's ever, a point that was really much of a lull.
Yeah. I wasn't sitting there, getting super bored or nothing. The time skips, I don't think are done very well, mostly because we don't notice they happen.
What are you talking about? He got a beard after one of them.
Yeah, I don't think they pulled them off very well, and they were pretty jarring for me. The last 45 minutes to an hour of the movie just entirely becoming the story of the crucifixion, I thought was an interesting choice. I think I would have preferred it if it was just Ben-Hur's story and we chopped an hour off, to be honest.
But how else was his mom and sister gonna get saved?
Right, yeah.
And dude, you're missing out on those sweet moments where you get to point the screen and really flex your Sunday school knowledge on us.
Yeah, exactly.
Hell yeah.
It kind of feels to me like they wanted to make, you know, a movie that was the story of Jesus, but they were worried about not being able to pull it off back in the day or something, and so they were like, oh, we'll just have this story about this guy who just happens to be around Jesus the whole time, you know?
Dude, speaking of Jesus, that part of the movie where Jesus is like fucking like being tried or whatever, and they just have a shadow just right over his fucking face is so ominous. That shit was terrifying.
Yeah, he's really
I was curious about that.
It's very JoJo's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember mentioning to Jackson, I thought this was a really interesting way to just play the long game and just throw in that story at the very end of this movie. I felt exactly what you guys were saying, where it's like, they really were just trying to find a way to make this story about Jesus somehow. And for some reason, they decided to throw sprinkles of it in throughout the movie, and then for some reason just hammer home the story right at the end. I thought, I will agree with the pacing. To be honest, I got kind of bored about, I probably would have been more engaged if you guys had told me that beforehand. I was getting kind of bored at the horse racing part. I was like, I don't need to see them complete every single lap. Like, I get people are like dying. I will say, watching that one fellow fall off his chariot, dodge like 2 chariots, and then get fucking trucked was a little funny, unfortunately. I'm wondering if that's the guy that died.
No one died. That's a myth.
Oh, thank God. Speaking of people that should have died, besides that guy, the Marcellus guy or whatever his name was, the rival, he was not making it off that race course. I don't know in what world somebody being trampled by 4 horses for like 30 seconds plus would have lived, or let alone move, but they did it in this movie, which is just a nitpick, which is unimportant.
I mean, he did die very shortly after that. They had to like carry him off.
Shortly is relative. We don't know. I mean, we can assume he died by end of day, which I guess is pretty quickly, but regardless, he shouldn't have made it off the racetrack. But I do agree with the whole, this movie did lack emotion. Like, I get I was supposed to care about, you know, maybe the mother and the sister. I was supposed to care about Ben-Hur. It's not like I didn't, but I feel like they were trying to maybe go at it a little more than what I felt. But I did also take into consideration that, yes, this is supposed to be more of a story they're telling than one we're supposed to feel. Like, it's just kind of like, this is what happened, you can feel however you want about the movie. So it's just there to kind of throw words at you. But I overall didn't think this movie was I thought it was more engaging than Cleopatra, for sure. I did view them both in the same vein. But I do get your reference when you're talking about New Testament Monte Cristo. It took me like 2 seconds to get that one.
There we go.
But yeah, I thought it was a solid movie. Nothing too terribly wrong about it besides the length. I don't get why these old movies are either all or nothing with how long they are, but you know, I guess we're just gonna get those.
This movie stinks! No, I'm not a huge fan, like what Tanner was talking about, of the Jesus shit going on with the two. Obviously, I think there's other ways they could have went about making Ben-Hur not want to seek revenge towards the Roman Empire for what they did to his family. But I don't think putting in the subplot of Jesus throughout this was really that worth it. Because, I mean, obviously Jesus was a character throughout the entire film. He was the first person we see in the film. We see him, you know, help Ben-Hur initially when he was about to fucking die after he got turned into a slave. But, like, I feel like it's pretty unnecessary. It could have been anybody that fucking helped him with the water. We didn't have to see it at the start. They could have found some other non-magical bullshit way of making his parents. Maybe they never turned into lepers. Maybe they were still just held in fucking captivity this whole time. And he saves them, and it's a triumphant end, and the movie's 2 hours long. But yeah, it's a little silly.
I think the biggest shame here is that this removes a film that Tanner could have picked during Jesus July. But I suppose, boys, it's time to get onto the rankings here. I suppose I'll kick them off. Yeah, I wasn't super high on this movie. I'm gonna give it a C.
Crazy. Alright, well, I guess I'll follow up. I thought this movie was pretty alright, just slightly better than Cleopatra, in which case I give it a B.
Whoa. Jackson?
I also gave it a B.
Let's
Holy
go.
Shit.
I think this movie has some good amount of stuff going for it, but also there's a lot of holding it back.
I like this movie a lot more than you guys. I'm also very much... I'm ranking it pretty much relative to how I feel about versus Cleopatra, which is tough. I think I like the broad stroke story of Ben-Hur more than Cleopatra. I liked the imagery of Cleopatra more. I liked the chariot action scene in Ben-Hur more than any of the action scenes in Cleopatra. I like the performances a lot more in Cleopatra, though. And the fact that the last, hour of this movie just turns into a completely different story that I liked, sure, but, it was just a complete departure from what we were doing.
Yeah.
Would I rather watch... I guess I'd rather watch Cleopatra.
But, could that just be because you just watched Ben-Hur as the thing, though?
That could be the case.
Tanner is a man of Jesus.
I think... yeah.
Why don't you just, give them the same rank if they seem to be so close to each other here?
Well, what I'm debating is if they're the same rank or if Ben-Hur is one lower. I think... I'm gonna put Ben-Hur one rank lower than Cleopatra at an A-.
And that puts it at B.
Yippee!